Have you ever had the strange feeling of remembering something with absolute certainty, only to discover that, apparently, it never happened? A movie line you could swear you heard differently. A logo that looks off from how you've always seen it. A historical event that now seems to have shifted in the timeline. What if I told you this isn't just a glitch in your memory, but a glitch in reality itself? We live in times when certainties are dissolving. The lines between what is real and what is remembered are blurring, as if the fabric of the universe is being rewoven right before our eyes. And more unsettling, it's happening with increasing frequency. What once seemed like an isolated case now appears in thousands of reports around the world. Something is moving behind the veil, and it's accelerating. This phenomenon became known as the Mandela Effect. But what you'll see here goes beyond what you've heard. Today, we'll explore the possibility that the reality you know is fragmenting, not because it's broken, but because it's being reprogrammed by you, by us, by a consciousness that is awakening. In this video, you'll understand why your perception is becoming the key to accessing different versions of reality. Get ready to see what's always been around you, but you hadn't yet noticed. What is the Mandela Effect? Imagine waking up one day and discovering that something you've always known to be true simply isn't anymore. A name, an image, a quote, an event. Everything seems the same, but it's not. It's as if reality has undergone a subtle, almost imperceptible edit, leaving behind a persistent feeling that something isn't right. That feeling is the starting point of what we now call the Mandela Effect. The term was born from an apparently absurd situation. Thousands of people around the world shared the memory that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s. It wasn't just a vague recollection. They remembered details, emotions, even news coverage and images that supposedly never existed. The problem? Mandela was released, became president, and died only in 2013. So, how could so many people remember something that technically never happened? The phenomenon didn't stop there. Over the years, it began appearing in countless areas of daily life. Brands with unexplained spelling changes, iconic movie lines that were never said, geographic locations that seem off, characters who vanished from pop culture. And the most intriguing part, people from different parts of the world share the same divergent memories. Are these just collective memory errors? Or are we witnessing something much bigger? A glitch in the matrix of reality? A shift in timelines? A collision of parallel versions of the world? The Mandela Effect is more than a curious phenomenon. It raises deep questions about memory, reality, and consciousness. What are we really accessing when we remember something? And what if these divergent memories are echoes of alternate realities? Fragments of a universe we once inhabited, now overlapping another? At its core, the Mandela Effect is a crack in the mirror of reality. Small, discreet, but impossible to ignore once you see it. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's the key to understanding that what we call real is far more fluid, mutable, and mysterious than we imagined. The spiritual glitch, reality as a projection of consciousness. There's something deeply unsettling about the feeling that reality is glitching, as if in certain moments it blinks, as if something slips through the cracks of what we've always called normal. But what if the problem isn't reality itself, but how we perceive it? Ancient spirituality and modern physics are beginning to meet at a common point. Consciousness isn't just something that observes the world, it shapes it. The universe, far from being a fixed, predictable machine, behaves like a field of possibilities, responding to the presence of an observer. What you see, feel, remember, and believe collapses that reality into a specific form. In other words, everything you call real is actually a vibrational response to your state of consciousness. Now imagine that this consciousness, yours and that of millions of people, is constantly shifting, oscillating between fear, doubt, beliefs, and awakening. Imagine what happens to the field of reality when collective observation goes out of sync. What forms is a perceptual instability, a kind of spiritual glitch, small cracks in the consensus narrative of existence. It's as if the universe were a liquid mirror, reflecting our internal frequencies in real time. When there's harmony, everything feels fluid and coherent. But when the collective mind collapses, when attention disperses, faith fragments, or vibration rises or breaks, that mirror starts to distort images, shift events, scramble memories. These distortions aren't errors, they're messages. They're revelations encoded in events that seem wrong. The Mandela Effect, in this sense, appears as a crack in the software of reality, not because reality is breaking, but because we're beginning to perceive that it has always been more malleable than we thought. The quantum field, according to modern physics, is a space where all possibilities exist simultaneously. Consciousness, by focusing on one of them, collapses that possibility into form. Spirituality calls this conscious creation. Science calls it the observer effect. But both point to the same mystery: reality is a response to perception. When you remember something that didn't happen, maybe you're accessing a possibility your consciousness once visited in a different vibrational state. Maybe your frequency briefly collapsed a parallel version of the world. And maybe the increase of this phenomenon is revealing something even deeper: our ability to transcend the limits of linear reality and access the infinite field of being. Reality as a projection of consciousness isn't just a poetic metaphor. It's a revolution in how we relate to the world. Everything vibrates. Everything responds. Everything transforms according to what you emit. And when there's a glitch, a crack, a distortion, maybe the universe isn't trying to confuse you. Maybe it's inviting you to see the code behind the form, and once you see the code, nothing is ever the same. The current acceleration. Why is it happening more now? Have you ever had the strange feeling that time is moving faster, that the days are shorter, events more intense, and the world seems to be spinning at a different frequency? This perception isn't just psychological, it's energetic. Something is accelerating in Earth's vibrational field, and along with it, the very structure of reality seems to be becoming unstable. What used to be isolated reports of glitches in reality are now multiplying on a global scale. The Mandela Effect is no longer just an internet curiosity. It's become a direct reflection of the perceptual fragmentation we're experiencing. But why is this happening now with such frequency and intensity? We live in an era of constant stimulation. Our minds are hyper-connected, exposed to a flood of information, images, sounds, news, and opinions. This overstimulation doesn't just fragment our attention. It directly affects how we collapse reality around us. The mind, overloaded, loses focus. And where there is no focus, distortion follows. But there's something even deeper happening beneath this acceleration. We are in the midst of a collective vibrational shift. Spiritual awakening is no longer a quiet, individual phenomenon. It's a global movement. millions of people are starting to question the nature of reality, seeking deeper connection with the universe, stepping out of autopilot and becoming conscious observers. And when consciousness expands, it drags with it the very limits of what we call reality. Quantum physics already shows us that everything exists in a state of superposition until the observer intervenes. But what if now there are multiple observers, each with their own vibration, intention, and frequency, collapsing different versions of reality simultaneously? The result can only be one thing: perceptual instability. The matrix begins to show its cracks because it's being pressed by something it wasn't designed to contain: the awakening of the human spirit. There's also an energetic factor acting on a large scale. Earth, as a living and conscious organism, is raising its frequency. Many call this the planetary ascension. This rising vibration creates a more accelerated energetic field, where time feels compressed and cycles move faster. In this field, what used to take years to change can now shift in days. And this too affects human perception. It's not that the Mandela Effect is happening more, it's that we are becoming more sensitive to reality's glitches. We're more alert, more attuned to the essence behind the form. We're stepping out of the automatic mode of existence and starting to observe, and in observing, we transform. This acceleration we're experiencing is the prelude to an even greater shift. It's the universe slowly revealing that what we called real has always been a fluid construction fed by collective vibration. Now that vibration is changing, and the old construct is beginning to unravel, and with it come the signs. Mismatched memories, altered details, strange moments that make you pause and wonder, am I even in the same timeline I used to be? The answer might be more surprising than you think. What if you are the one shifting timelines? What if all these strange changes you've been noticing, names that are no longer the same, lines that sound different, memories that don't fit, aren't mistakes in reality, but signs that you are no longer on the same timeline? This possibility might seem absurd at first, but think for a moment. If the universe is made up of infinite possibilities existing in parallel, as quantum physics already suggests, then every choice, every thought, every emotion you emit is actually connecting you to a specific version of reality. And if that's true, then simply shifting your vibration could move you to a new timeline. This isn't about physically traveling to another universe like in a sci-fi movie. It's more subtle and at the same time more profound. It's a change of frequency, as if you're tuning into a new channel of reality without moving from where you are. The world still looks the same, but details change. People behave differently. Events you remember didn't quite happen the way you thought. Tiny cracks appear in the scenery, revealing that something has been rewritten. Maybe what you remember did happen, just not here. It happened in another version of reality you once inhabited. And now, by shifting your vibration, you've left that line behind and entered another, where the records are different. It's like turning the page to a new chapter. The story continues, but on a different path. Your body stays, but your frequency shifts. And when frequency shifts, everything around you responds. Spirituality calls this shifting, the movement of consciousness across the infinite versions of the now. And what's most extraordinary is that it doesn't require physical effort. The key is consciousness. The more present you are, the more aligned with your essence, the more intentional your focus. the closer you get to a reality that resonates with your inner state. Life isn't binding you to a single timeline. You are free to move among possibilities. In fact, you already do, you just haven't noticed. But the signs are starting to show. When you begin remembering things that never happened, maybe it's because you've just crossed an invisible border between what was and what is becoming. This transition doesn't need to be dramatic. It can be subtle, yet deep, and it often occurs in moments of great expansion or emotional rupture, a decision that changes everything, a sudden insight, a state of deep meditation, a painful experience that breaks an old pattern. In all these cases, a vibrational realignment takes place. And with it, a new version of the world begins to unfold. You are not a passenger of reality. You are the creator. And as your consciousness expands, the universe begins to reveal higher versions of your own story, versions where you've already overcome what once seemed impossible, versions where you already are who you came here to be. And what if, deep down, the Mandela Effect is just the echo of that leap, a trace from the realities you've left behind, as you journey, consciously or not, through the infinite roads of time?
The role of memory, frequency or archive. What is memory, really? Just a simple record stored in the brain like a digital file? A chemical fragment imprinted in neural tissue? That's the traditional view, the idea that remembering is merely retrieving stored information. But what if memory is something far subtler, more energetic, more expansive than we were ever told? What if remembering isn't about recovering data, but about resonating with a frequency? Imagine, just for a moment, that every memory is like a radio station, a specific vibration still existing, floating in the quantum field of existence. When you remember something, you're not necessarily pulling a static file from the past, but rather tuning your consciousness into that vibration. It's as if the memory were not an echo, but an energetic re-entry into the experience itself. This perspective changes everything, because if memory is vibration, then it follows the same laws of the energetic field. And in that field, all possibilities coexist. There is no fixed past, no unmoving present. Everything pulses at once, and what you access depends on the frequency you're vibrating at now. Maybe that's why so many people remember things that didn't happen on this timeline, but that, in another layer of reality, were real, vivid, even fundamental. The rational mind may not grasp it, but the soul remembers. The soul carries a wisdom that transcends linear time. It moves by resonance. And when something vibrates in tune with what has been lived, even in another dimension, the memory surfaces. Many of these strange, solitary, off-pattern memories are rejected by the system, labeled as mistakes, imagination, error. But what if we began to welcome them as clues, as vibrational records of versions of ourselves that once walked through parallel realities? What if memory, in truth, is a portal? There are people who remember the names of countries that never existed, maps with different borders, events erased from history. They're not necessarily wrong. Perhaps they're simply tuned to a different station, a different layer of reality, one that their frequency touched, even for a brief moment. In this context, memory becomes a spiritual compass. It shows us what we're connecting with now. It reveals where we've been vibrationally. And it also points to what we're ready to integrate. Because there are no random memories. Each fragment carries a message, a chance to recognize pieces of yourself that were asleep. The phrase,
the soul remembers what the world denies, gains new weight here, because while the world seeks logic, the soul seeks truth, and many truths the soul carries don't fit into the fixed structure of consensual reality. They come from places where time is fluid, and consciousness is free to travel between worlds. So, next time you remember something that never happened, maybe the wisest thing isn't to doubt, but to listen, to feel, to allow that vibration to show you what logic cannot reach. Because memory, in its deepest aspect, is not an archive, it's a bridge. And some bridges lead you straight into other realities.
Signs. You're observing from outside the common programming. There is a quiet, profound moment on the path of awakening when you begin to realize something has shifted, not out there, but within. It's as if you've crossed an invisible threshold. People continue with their routines. Places still look the same. The sky still rises and sets. But something in you no longer sees the world the same way. It's as if some sort of decoding were happening behind the scenes of your consciousness. A heightened perception, a gaze that pierces the veil. This is one of the subtlest and most powerful signs that you've started to observe reality from outside the common programming. It doesn't mean you've completely left the system, but your consciousness is no longer limited by its rules. It's like being in the game, but starting to see the code behind the visuals. And that changes everything. You start noticing small inconsistencies. Phrases people say suddenly sound hollow. Repetitions that used to pass unnoticed. A constant déjà vu, as if you're living multiple versions of the same scene layered on top of each other. It's a subtle, persistent strangeness, a kind of vibrational dislocation, where the world keeps spinning but no longer quite in sync with you. Often, you remember things no one else remembers, details, words, situations. At first, you may question yourself, am I going crazy? But over time, you notice a pattern. These isolated memories aren't random. They carry an energy, an inner coherence that goes beyond linear logic. It's as if they were memories from versions of yourself who walked other paths and now are trying to integrate. You also start to notice time behaving differently. Clocks still count the hours, but time itself doesn't seem to flow the same. Sometimes it speeds absurdly. Other times it drags almost to a stop. Whole chunks of days seem to disappear. Places you know look altered, even if no one else notices. It's like you're slipping through cracks in reality without ever leaving your place. And then comes an inner silence, a strange kind of peace, not from the absence of problems, but from the perception that everything is being orchestrated far beyond the visible. You begin trusting synchronicities more, the intuition that whispers unexplainable truths, the choices that arise without logic but with direction. You stop trying to understand everything with the mind and start feeling with consciousness. These signs aren't proof of spiritual superiority. They're natural symptoms of vibrational transition, indications that your frequency is no longer resonating with the old collective program. You're accessing a new layer of reality, one where the observer is also the creator, where certainties dissolve and in their place, something more precious is born, living awareness. Observing from outside the program isn't escaping the world, it's seeing it as it truly is. It's recognizing the cycles, the illusions, the narratives, and at the same time, realizing that you can create something new from them. The mind may resist, but your spirit already knows something is changing, and if you feel it, it's because you are already changing too.
We've reached the end of our journey, but perhaps it's only the beginning of a new way of seeing reality. What you experience as the world is not fixed, not immovable. It's a vibrational mirror of your consciousness. And when you begin to notice the glitches, the shifts, the solitary memories, it's not madness, it's awakening. Reality isn't breaking, it's responding to your expansion. It's showing you that there's more, much more, than the eyes can see. The distortions, the lapses. The signs are invitations, not to question your sanity, but to trust your perception. So now I invite you to share. Have you ever experienced something that felt like a Mandela Effect? An impossible memory, yet undeniably real? Leave a comment below.